Hey guys, my name is David and welcome back to episode 14 of Grimm Tuesdays. The series where I am going through all of the fairy tales by the brothers Grimm, and in today's video I am going to be discussing the tale called The Three Snake Leaves. Now before I get into this video, I just wanted to ask you guys a question. I ask this question pretty much at the end of every one of these episodes, and that is if anyone has actually read or was actually read this story as a child, because the concept of a child reading something that outrageous is completely mind-blowing to me. But more for this one because it's so outrageous. So please tell me, was anyone read this as a child? And I'm genuinely interested to know what effect that had on you. Did it scare you? Did it shock you? Did it give you nightmares? I honestly want to know what people thought of this as a child. But so far, this story is the closest thing to epic fantasy that the brothers have achieved so far. Well, in this collection anyway. This focuses around an elderly gentleman who has a son. And this gentleman is extremely poor and he struggles to even provide for himself. So his son says to him that don't worry about me. I will go off into the world and I will look after myself. You don't have to worry about me. So when the son is going on his travels, he comes across this king who is in the middle of this massive battle and this very important war. And when he's on the battlefield, everyone around him is getting mowed down by arrows and is dropping down dead, and at that point all hope seems lost. It's at this moment that the son rises up and says, no, we have to band together and fight this enemy and save our kingdom. And this results in him winning the war. So when they go back to the kingdom, the king hears about this and he is so pleased, he rewards the son with whatever he wants. Now, I'm not sure whether it's the same king or the same kingdom, but at some point in the story, the son comes across a princess, and as usual in all these stories, there's a competition, not just to win her hand in marriage. It's more complicated than that. Basically, what she's looking for in a partner, in a prince, in a lover, is someone that can promise her that the day that she dies, that individual will willingly put themselves into the coffin and be buried alive. Even if she dies the very next day, they have to willingly want to get into the coffin and be buried alive with her. I think this is just her way of them showing their devotion and love towards her and proving that they cannot live without her. And she even says that she's willing to do the same thing. And she even says that there were numerous other people that heard about this and decided, no, I don't want anything to do with it. And honestly, can you blame them? It's like, oh, shall we get into a relationship? Oh, by the way, if I manage to die tomorrow, you're going to get buried alive with me and it's going to be extremely painful. I'm like, no wonder these guys just ran off. You know, I mean, that's not just creepy, that's scary, that really is. I mean, you thought about being buried alive and slowly dying of hunger and slowly dying a painful death. And also lying next to a corpse. It's like, oh my god. But as our hero reluctantly agrees to this, he soon discovers that the princess, several days later, dies. So she's put in a tomb and the king enforces the son to obey by his late daughter's wishes. And basically there's no backing out of it now. So he's taken to a tomb where her body is, and in the tomb there's a table where it has 3 lights, which I presume they mean candles. 3 loaves of bread and 3 bottles of wine. And he's told that this is all he has, and when he runs out, then he will slowly starve and eventually die. So when he's in the tomb, he sees a snake that is slithering towards the corpse of the princess. And he is so enraged by this that he gets out his sword and chops it into 3 pieces. Then another snake comes along shortly after this and brings 3 leaves. These are just standard leaves. It isn't really described about what kind of leaves they are. But the snake brings these 3 leaves and puts them in between the severed pieces of the snake, kind of like joining the snake up with these leaves. And the snake is kind of resting on them. And shortly after this, the snake miraculously is healed. All of its parts are joined up together and it slithers away and it's perfectly fine. But the 3 leaves are left behind. And the son is shocked by this and he takes the 3 leaves and he puts one on each of the princess's eyes and one on her mouth. I'm not entirely sure about why he does this. I'm not even sure whether the princess had any visible wounds or injuries that he could have put them on instead. But regardless, that's what he did. And as the snake did, the princess herself comes back to life. But when she does, to quote Pet Sematary by Stephen King, she comes back wrong. At first, she seems relieved by coming back to life, and she recognizes the son or her husband, and they go off onto a ship together. And during this voyage, we are told that the princess is no longer in love with the prince or the son, that she has changed in some way. And I saw this as a after effect of what these leaves did to her. And she kind of becomes attracted to the ship's captain, and together they both conspire to commit murder and to go to the prince when he's sleeping, and they both take his body and throw it overboard. At this point in the story, one of the prince's servants, who is also on the ship, sees this and he gets a small boat from the ship and he sails to the floating dead corpse of his former master. The prince had instructed his servant to hold on to the leaves and to guard them and to basically keep them for when they are needed again. He takes the leaves and he restores the prince back to his living state. While this is happening, the princess and the captain are sailing back to the kingdom to tell the king that the prince has actually died and to make up a lie to cover their tracks. But the son, or the prince, and his servants sail back to the kingdom and they manage to get there first. And they tell the king what the princess did and the captain did. And the king is so shocked by this that he tells the prince and his servant to go into the other room. And when the princess and the captain come in to see him, they tell their side of the story. And the king then instructs the prince and his servant to come into the room, and pretty much the princess and the captain are condemned for their actions, and they are told to go back onto the ship, which they have riddled with all these holes. They put all these holes in the ship and it slowly sinks and they are presumed to have drowned. It's nice that there's a consequence at the end for these individuals. Usually in these stories by the brothers, there is no consequence, there is no punishment for what they've actually did or done. And despite what these characters have done to our heroes in these stories, they've always seemed to have been forgiven, or their actions have been forgotten, and everyone lives happily ever after, and you're like, hang on, why weren't they punished for this? So it's kind of nice to see a consequence for the villains in this story. As I said, it's kind of shocking as well. I'm like, I couldn't imagine this being read to a child in bed. It's like, think about all the awkward conversations that they would actually have with their mother. It's like, Mum, what does buried alive mean? And why did the princess try to kill her husband? It's like, what an awkward conversation that would have been. And what a thing to read to a child in bed. I mean, true, no one gets viciously murdered and ripped apart, and it's not bloody and gory and or anything like that. But I mean, the tolerance level for children back in the 1800s must have been so high. They must have been as tough as nails. So guys, that's all I had to say. Thank you so much for watching. It means so much to me as always. So yeah, with all that the way all said and done, have a great day, read some awesome books, and I will see you all in my next video.